Hi, I'm Phil Kerner, the Tool and Die Guy, and this is Tool Room Tuesday. So, Happy New Year. Today is January 1st, 2019. I'm glad I said it right. Now the trick will be for the next week or two to actually print it right? Always hard to remember that change in date. So, before we get started, this program is being sponsored with the help and assistance of industrial sales and manufacturing right here in Erie, Pennsylvania. And if you'd like to know more about ISM, terrific facility, 90,000 square feet under one roof, and then two more facilities right around the corner. ISM can pretty much do anything you need done, from CNC machining, CNC turning, to fabrication, to powder coating, to assembly. One-stop shop, ISMErie.com. So we'd like to thank them for being on board. So tonight's topic, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, we want to talk a little bit about apprenticeships and mentoring. And I was lucky enough to have a couple really great mentors in my life, and sometimes you don't realize they're mentors while they're being mentors, and then you look back and say, wow, I got really good at something because a few people took the time to get me excited about it, right? I remember actually in high school, my history teacher, I was 7th or 8th grade, I had a great history teacher who made me fall in love with World War II history. To this day, it's a big passion of mine. But I was also lucky enough to go through a terrific apprenticeship right here in Erie, Pennsylvania. Well, right before my apprenticeship, though, I went to the Erie County Technical School, where I majored in tool and die drafting, tool and die design drafting. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that guy, Mr. Anthony Tullio. And then we're going to talk about when I left the tech school to go on co-op, I worked for another great mentor, taskmaster, named Norman Reitman. And between the two of those guys, they set me up very well, Mr. Tullio did at the tech school, for Mr. Reitman. Mr. Tullio taught me the basics of drafting, and when I went under Mr. Reitman, he took it to a whole nother level. You know, when I look back, and the big word right now is you hear a lot of people talking about vocational training, and maybe all these kids don't have to go to college. My confusion here is what's the game plan then? You know, do we send our kids to these trade schools that are quite expensive, the ones you go to after high school? You know, you can spend $30,000 or $40,000 here in Erie, Pennsylvania on a 2-year program, a machine shop CNC programming deal. And I'm not sure what they're going to get paid when they get out of that program, because that's a big bill to pay back, right? And I'm a big believer, I think, in some of the shops taking the training on themselves, rather than trying to get the other schools to always do the training for kids that maybe didn't have vocational training in high school. Then they get out of high school and they're looking for something to do. Well, a big thing they do now is they try to hire people and get them into a trade like machining, and hopefully they'll catch on. And you know, the reality is, in my generation, not that we were any better, but it was just different. You know, we were just a little bit more mechanically inclined. And the reason for that was we fixed most of the stuff that broke, because most of the time you could fix it. Today, most of the stuff is built, you can't even get it apart to fix it, right? But back in the 60s and 70s, when something broke, I remember going down to the electronics store with my father back in the 60s to get tubes for the television set, right? And then, you know, you fixed your own flat tires. You just didn't go everywhere and get stuff fixed. You just did it yourself. Well, my point is, a lot of the kids now don't have that practical, technical knowledge, that what we call it mechanical ability. And what I would be doing, and I would highly recommend anybody doing, you know, a lot of bright kids, this trade isn't what it used to be. We're not using turntables and you know, slide rules anymore, right? We're using mostly CNC equipment. And with some good training, I still think it's a 2-year program. You can get somebody up in this trade pretty quickly now. I'm not going to say they're going to be a top A, class A toolmaker, mold maker, but they can learn to be a pretty good machinist if you train them right. But the first thing is, you got to give them an aptitude test. I just never understood that. When you're going to hire a kid, male or female, into this trade, I remember I had to take an aptitude test. It was a pretty simple one. I think it was 6 questions, but I had to solve some fractional problems. I had to look at a bunch of gears, and if this one turned this way, which way did this one turn? Which way do you turn a bolt to tighten it and loosen it? Just to see if the kid's got any aptitude. Then once that's done, I think it's up to the company to train them with in-house stuff. You know, every company has guys that are good at math and good at design and good at lathes, good at mills. You're better off handling it yourself. That's my opinion. With some night school, doesn't hurt. So anyways, let's talk a little bit about my mentors. I'm going to show you some of the work that I did under them. I've saved for a long time, 50 years or 40 years. Mr. Tony Tullio, and a funny story is Mr. Tony Tullio. He was an interesting guy, and Anthony Tullio, and he was a Golden Gloves boxer back in the 40s. He was also in the Army, worked as a engineer for General Electric, and then he became a teacher. And he was a very patient guy. Mr. Tullio, it's interesting though, because one of the things I do a lot on the Tool and Die Guy site and here on YouTube is legacy. And that's why I interview people. And that's why I want to get those stories out there, because here's a guy that was just a great guy, you know, and he's nowhere to be found. There is not a picture of him to be found. I'd love to show you a picture of him. And it was interesting because I found his obituary. I think he passed away in 2004. And Mr. Tullio, I was pleased to see he had boxed in the Senior Olympics, which makes sense. But he passed away. There was no picture in the obit. There might have been one back then, but there isn't now. I got a hold of his son, Tony Tullio Jr. Now, it's funny, when I knew Tony Jr., he was like 32 years old. Well, now he's 72. So I looked him up and tracked him down from the obituary. I found him in Florida. His wife answered the phone, and I told him what I was doing, and her what I was doing, and I said, I need a picture. And she never got back to me. She said she'd send one, and that's okay. You know, I don't want to be this creepy guy on the internet calling people looking for photographs of loved ones that have passed away, but then I realized I was being this creepy guy on the internet, calling people looking for pictures of people who passed away. So no picture of Mr. Tullio. Mr. Reitman I did get a picture of, and had to dig hard for that one, but I had found his granddaughter here in Erie, Pennsylvania, and she sent me a great picture of him. So without further ado, this got some thoughts on mentorship and training. You might just have to do it yourself to get it done right. You know the rule, right? If you want something done, do it yourself. And if you're a strong company that believes in training, you can probably put together your own training curriculum. It'll be better than anything you'll get online or at the school, to tell you the truth. So let's get started with a couple examples from my mentors, and then we'll go into some cool tools. All right, so here's an old blueprint, and it's literally an old blueprint. This is the stuff we used to use with the ammonia. For you guys back in the 70s, probably remember this. You had a piece of tracing vellum you'd do your original drawing on, and you'd put that through with a piece of this paper, and the ammonia activated it. And you could really gas yourself up. But the deal is these prints lasted forever. Well, the reality is this blueprint's seen better days, and I want to use it for a lesson, and I got to flatten it out a little bit. So how am I going to do that without destroying it? Well, some of the wrinkles are never going to come out because they're creases. See these creases? They're not going to come out. They've been in there for 50 years, but we can get some of these wrinkles out and make it a little bit more presentable. The good news is this paper is quite hardy, okay? This stuff can handle it. And what I got here is a trusty iron set on high, cotton, we're going to use some steam here. And what I also have here is a piece of cardstock, okay? It's like the stuff you'd see business cards made of. And what I'm going to do is steam it right through that. And we'll get some of these out of here and get this thing somewhat flattened out. You can see these little wrinkles over here. And I'm not even afraid to do that once in a while if the wrinkles are severe enough. But see, some of these are just not going to come out. They've just been in there too long. But this will assist you in getting it a little more presentable. Like this corner over here wants to stay rolled up. Hopefully we can get that flattened a little bit. Now, when I'm done with this, I've got a couple options of how I want to proceed with this drawing. And because I'd like a more pristine copy of it, but the original is nowhere to be found because it was done 50 years ago. But I'd love to get my hands on it. I actually know where it is, but there's no way that place is going to give it up. So that's the way that goes. So I have a microphone cord floating around here. and they're not going to give it up. So I have a couple choices here. I had it scanned in once, and they did it in black and white. And I don't know why they scanned it in black and white. Maybe their scanner couldn't handle color, but that would help, because my only other option, believe it or not, and I've done this with great success in the past, it just is very ballsy to do, is to chop this print up into 8.5 by 11 sheets and then run it through my scanner here at the house, then stitch all the pieces back together in Photoshop. And I've done it. You can do some amazing work. It's just the heart-wrenching exercise of going through and physically cutting up something this old, okay? So that's the original drawing, and this discoloration isn't from my ironing. That's the ammonia over the years, just the way it evaporates. I was right the first time. All right, so you guys had some questions about that on one of my Facebook videos, so that's what I was doing with that. And one of the things you guys also noticed in that Facebook video was this. And somebody's like, whoa, what's that? Let's zoom in on this a little bit. And a couple guys figured it out. We called them pencil sharpeners. You can call them lead sharpeners, whatever you want. Drafting pencil, what we used to use, okay? And these come, good draftsmen always had 4 or 5 of these on their drawing board, different grades. You used like a 5H lead for dimension lines and a 2H lead for object lines, so your object would stand out, and it was an art. And but you want to have a nice sharp pencil when you did it. So the way it worked is, and let's zoom in a little bit more here. Okay, you put your pencil in this, and you just turn it. It's a piece of sandpaper in there, and then when you were done, you stuck your pencil in the foam to take the dust off of it, because as a draftsman, the last thing you wanted was graphite dust on your white paper. Because if your hands were sweaty at all, or even if they weren't, you'd smear your drawing. And a few smears here and there would happen, but you don't want a full drawing just full of smears, right? So that would, just a little thing to knock the dust off the pencil. So that's what that is. This is a really nice one. This is one of the old die-cast ones. It's not the plastic ones they came out with later. So this one's got some weight to it. This is made by the Dietzen company, and they were a big drafting supply company back when I was in the trade, or when I was doing drafting. So that's what that is. So hope that you find that entertaining. Get your iron out. All right, so mentoring. My first mentor in this trade was a guy named Anthony Tullio and Tony Tullio. And unfortunately, you know, I always talk about legacy, and that's one of the reasons I interview fogs and interview people that I have a good story to tell. Unfortunately, Mr. Tullio passed away in 2004, and I didn't keep in touch with him. And there are no pictures of this guy. I called the tech school, they threw them all out. Why they would do that? They threw out all their yearbooks, I guess, whatever. And this guy doesn't even exist anymore. I looked up his obituary online, and you know, there was nothing there I didn't already know, except for one thing. Served in World War II, was a Golden Gloves boxer, and he was a great teacher. And I did see that the surprise in his obituary was that he was in the Senior Olympics, and that doesn't surprise me. He was a fitness nut. But anyways, this is the book we worked from at the Erie County Technical School back in the 70s, and it's called The Fundamentals of Engineering Drawing. And this is how we learned the basics of drawing, and our lessons were basically loosely based on this book. And there's a lot of things about projection, just learning your line types, 3D stuff, auxiliary views, intersections, developments, and the drawings in here are, as you can imagine, just unbelievable, because back then everybody had to do it by hand, no AutoCAD. Imagine that. And the detail on these drawings, and I'll take a couple snapshots of these, and maybe I'll throw those in here, because I'm not sure if the detail's showing up here. But this book was from 1960. It's tired, but I'm still in awe. And when I bring this to work and show people, young guys now, they're stunned by the amount of detail in these drawings that were done on the board. Amazing. And the illustrations, or I call more of an illustration than a drawing, it would have been so clear back then to build these parts, because the designers were part designers, part engineers, and part artists. And the shading and everything, there was nothing left for you to think about. If somebody handed me that drawing today, I wouldn't even believe it. It's so
beautifully done, and it's so clear what they want. You know, they always go back to lean manufacturing. One of the points of lean manufacturing is, you know, good drawings. Because if I've got to hunt for dimensions, that's not lean, right? So this is a very cool book. Well, what did we do with this book? So again, back to Mr. Tullio. And this is my book from 1975 to 1978. And that's what we started with. Very simple line types, okay? Just learning how to use our square and a T-square. And then we started simple things and patterns. And you can see the red marks. You could always tell when I stopped and started a line. You want to go one line, not one back and forth, right? And then, you know, little marks, you could see he would touch them up and he'd tell me what I was doing wrong. Very early. This is September 1975. This is my first few weeks. And get a little more, working on the line types. I won't go through the whole thing. And I can see right there the visual of this. I might look pretty cool right now, but the reality is these lines aren't perfectly spaced, but that's how you learn. You got to do it. Better, much better. The difference between that one, which was done on September 26th, 2 days later, I was getting better. I like that one. And again, this is where we started learning how to, this is all done with a compass. If you look at the back of this page, it's all full of holes. And I didn't do so good on this one. He was not happy. I got a 75 on this one. And it's all full of holes. And you know, learning how to use a compass and keep it sharp and get the points right and adjusted right. All right, and then you learn how to print. You got to learn how to print if you're going to be a draftsman or a designer back then. And that's why I still have excellent printing, is because I did crazy stuff like this, right? Then we learned how to, our different lines, center lines, dimension lines. And then we go to the letters, learn how to print those. Practice, practice, practice. I got a 90 on that one. More compass work, ba-boom, ba-boom, more compass work. Again, no circle templates, guys. And then we move on. Now, one of the fun things about this class was they taught us trigonometry. So this drawing wasn't about learning how to draw, it's about figuring out all the points with trig. And we had to show our math on the back of the page on a separate sheet to prove that we didn't cheat. And back then all we had was a calculator, thank God, and a trig book. Back to more compass work. Getting a little more involved here now. We're into January. I've been doing this for 4 months now. 100% on that one. Ding, ding, ding. Math problem on the back. Then we move on. This is a fun one. I think this is a blank development. Yes, a blank development. How would to calculate what this part would look like as a straight piece. And I had to do all the math and do the blank development and show the math on the back. You know, there's something about doing this by hand, right? You have to think. And then learning isometric drawings. And then we got into some cutaway views for different operations. Again, all taught by hand. Cylindrical drawing, you can't even believe, I think I'll take a picture of this, the layout lines on this to get this right. This is all done by projection and lines. There's a lot going on here, not one compass mark. This is probably all done with a French curve. Another operational drawing. Now we learned how to sketch, 3D sketching, which I'm still pretty good at thanks to stuff like this. Sketching, sketching, sketching. Oop, big red mark on that one. And then, of course, as we moved on, the drawings got bigger, okay? And finally, what's this one? I always like to show the ones that have the math problems on them. They let us use bigger paper because we were important now. And let's see here. Yeah, and then I had to show the math on the back of that one. Learned a lot. I learned more from math in that class than I did in my math class in high school. And then the cutaway views. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, so how did this work out? Well, look at that. Yep, September 1977. These were right before I went out on co-op. So the drawing quality got better and better. I could see it just going through the evolution of this, right, to that. And that's how you teach. So Mr. Tullio. So good guy. And one of the things he always kept on his desk, because when you're a draftsman, you used to use these lead pens, right? Lead holders, I guess they call them, pencils. And lead pencil. And we had several of these on our bench at our drafting board. you would have very fine grades, so like a 5H for dimension lines, and then a 2H for object lines, and in between for print your text and things. So that made your drawing stand up. The problem with these things is they leave a lot of smears on your drawings, right? So I was showing this earlier, this pencil sharpener, lead pointer, whatever you want to call it, and this is how you sharpen. There's a piece of sandpaper in there, and you'd always pull it out and stick it in the foam to get the dust off. But you still had dust. Yeah, you erased something, whatever, so you had to use a brush to brush off your drawing constantly. Well, Mr. Tullio had the coolest brush on his bench. When I graduated, he gave me this. And this was his drafting brush from General Electric Company. And it says right on it, 100% horsehair. All right? Well, the coolest thing, it never had a handle. It broke off back in the 30s or something, he told me. Never had a handle, but it's fine. We use it just like this, but look at this. And there it says, A. Tullio. I've kept this for a long time, and I love this. It's a beautiful piece of history. I still use it right here in my studio, just to brush off things as I'm working along, and it's great. So, Mr. Tullio, thank you for everything you taught me. You're a good mentor, and that's what's going to get into part 2 of my mentors, because the next guy I was well prepared for because of Tony Tullio's training. So when I went out on co-op, I had the opportunity to work for a man named Norman Reitman. And Norman was an interesting guy. He actually was a professional registered engineer in Pennsylvania, and he never finished high school. He quit early to go into World War II. And he did the most beautiful drawings, and he was on contract to this company, subcontract to R.M. Kerner Company. His name of his company was Rex Engineering, which stood for Reitman Experimental. And again, we'll have to go through and take some photos of this so you can see how beautiful this is. But again, as a tool maker, if somebody handed me a print like this today, I would die. I hope I don't die, but I'd be pretty excited because this makes so much sense. I can see what's going on here in this beautiful shading that's been done here with these cylinder rods. And somebody said, looks like a drill head, and it is. It's a drill head. And back then we used to drill 4 holes at once. We'd make a drill box, they called it. And when the spindle turned, all 4 drills would turn at once and go into the piece, right? No CNC machines. But the detail he would do, and you say, well, what a waste of time doing all the shading. Not really, because when you're doing the shading, you're thinking about other things. You might shade a little area and then go over here because he had another idea. Then you shade. It was a way to recalculate in my head. I never got that good at the shading. He was really good at it. And again, I'll take some photos of this, a beautiful drawing. Now, I'm going to figure out a way to preserve this drawing so you guys can get a copy of it. It's beautiful. But the point is about mentoring. So Mr. Reitman, piece of work. He was a lot of fun. See, but he wore a tie every day to work. Only guy at the shop that wore a tie. And how did he train me? Well, let's see how he did here. This is a drawing that I did under his training after Mr. Tullio. And this drawing is quite intricate, and he taught me so much, and everything's clear as a bell here. And I tried to emulate his beautiful printing. I just could never get there. And I did this drawing in 1978. So I was 18 years old, and I was trained extremely well by Mr. Reitman. And I really worked hard to emulate him. And that's a good tip for anybody in the trade. Find those guys that are really good and emulate them. So he would lay the stuff out and give me a sketch, and I would go from there. And I did this drawing when I was 17. And sorry about that. But the details again, so I'll take some pictures of this. So, you know, you look back and you see this stuff, and I'll figure out a way to save this. These creases are just never going to come out. The only thing I think of doing is going to work and having them burn me out a couple of giant plates and shoving them under between 2 1-inch thick plates this size and letting them sit there for a couple of weeks. That might do it. Probably would. And they would probably do it. ISM would actually do that for me to preserve stuff like this. So there you go. Mentors mean a lot, and mentors can make a big difference in your life. And find those guys at work, those guys and gals, and you know, not everybody's good at everything, right? But when you find somebody that you say, you know what, that guy is really good at this thing, you know what? buy them a cup of coffee and take them out to dinner, and they'll teach you. They just want to know that you're earnest and you want to learn. And very proud of how I was taught in this trade. And I always talk about, I wish today we would go back to this mentoring aspect, because the buzzword of apprenticeships and training all sounds good, but you know, as I always say, there's more to training than X's and O's in football, right? You got to get them to the people to win, them to buy into what you're training them, and get them excited about manufacturing, and in this case, drawing, and a love of engineering, and watching people build what you drew, and watching the tool makers come in and say what an idiot you are. That's how you learn. So hope you enjoyed this, and I'm going to try and figure out a way to save these, and you guys might want these, and we'll put them up on the Tool and Die Guy site and give them away, because this is how it used to work. And let's go to some cool tools. Before we get to the tools, I thought I'd add this. This is a few close-up views of this drawing by Mr. Reitman. And at first glance, it doesn't look too bad, but these creases are just not going to come out. There's a little discoloration along the fold lines. This one's got some just some wrinkles in it. You know, I'd like to preserve this a little bit better than the shape it's in. I mean, I love the original. So what I did is I had it scanned in, and then I was able to bring this into Photoshop and reproduce it. So I think I'll throw this up on the Tool and Die Guy, and there's still a little of this discoloration, but it's a much neater drawing, and it's got a blue border around it. It says Excellence in Engineering, Norman Reitman, 1978. They screwed this one up, didn't make the print big enough. I'll show you the new and improved one. But we'll put this on the Tool and Die Guy site if you'd like a cool 24 by 36 ready to hang drawing. I guess got to get a price from my printer. Probably looking at something like $19.95 with shipping including. I think I can do it for that, but I'll confirm that. And here's what it looks like up on the wall, framed. Getting a little reflection off some of the lighting in here, but it's a nice piece. It shows you how we used to do things, and if you're interested, just go to the toolanddieguy.com. So let's move along to some cool tools. All right, first up on the cool tool list tonight, a STARRETT number 457 toolmaker square. I call this more of a pattern maker square, but this is a pretty cool piece of equipment here. Again, they still make these. It's a beautiful part. Every time I find something really old by STARRETT, they still make them. And how much do you think this costs if you wanted to buy this today? Try $238. Amazing. And this was my father's. It says FK right on the back here. And this is how you would check your angles. Now, I think this is more for pattern makers, because as a mold maker, I would never have relied on something like this to get an accurate angle. But when you're a pattern maker and you're making stuff out of wood, I get it. That would work great. And it's funny, this came with a straight blade and this angled blade, which is very important. And when I found this in my brother's toolbox when he passed away, it didn't have this. Well, many years ago, I had a junk drawer, and I knew this piece existed once I looked it up, and I saved it for 50 years, and I found it, and it still fits. So there you go, piece of history. The STARRETT number 457. I think it's a pattern maker square, to tell you the truth, but they might call it a tool maker square. And but it's a really great piece. And again, unbelievably, $238, and it could be yours. So that's that one, and let's do one more. Well, this was sent to me by a guy I met online named Mr. John Shirk, and he used to be a big fan of Working Hands Radio. And he owns Indicator Gauge in Dayton, Ohio. And if you have watched any of my programs previously, TOOLROOM Tuesday, I did a nice interview with John. He's a fun guy, very talented guy. And he loves the trade, and he sent me this. He wanted me to have it. And if you look closely here, it says Allen ENGCO, Allen Engineering Company. And this is a federal dial indicator, all redone by John Shirk. Well, he also sent this with a beautiful letter that I laminated, and he just said he was going through his collection of antique tools, and I'll just give you the synopsis of this. But not only is this very old, it has a definite historical importance. The Allison Engine Company developed the V1710-6C6 engine, And yeah, that was in the P-38 Lightning, World War II. And there you go. So, you know, John Shirk, that's why I love this guy. He takes good care of me, sends me stuff like this, and I hope you appreciate that. You know, some of this stuff, you know, went to actually liberate, you know, the world in World War II. It brought us to victory, and they depended on stuff like this and dial indicators like this to get the job done right. So there's a beautiful piece of history, and I own it. You don't. Eat your heart out. I don't know if anybody even says that anymore, but that is a nice piece, and love it. Love having it. It's like the leg lamp in my house. I keep putting it places, and my wife's like, "Really? Do you need to really put that in the front window?" It's like, yes, I do. So I hope you enjoyed this little piece of history. P-38 Lightning engine was built using this. Part of it was. So that's it from here, January 1st, 2019. That drawing you saw there, we're going to put that up, Mr. Reitman's Excellence in Engineering drawing. We're going to put that up on the Tool and Die Guy site soon. I'll let you know when. And also, as a New Year's special, from me to you, if you're not a member of the toolandieguy.com, $10 off this week. Better than nothing, right? 350 videos out there on training of all the stuff I've taught, cutter grinding, surface grinding, milling, CNC, setups, because I always say setups are the biggest time robber in any shop. I watch people spend so much time on setups because they don't know what they're doing, and I can teach you so you do know what you're doing. So again, I'm Phil Kerner, the Tool and Die Guy, and we'll see you on the next Tool Room Tuesday.
I'm just a hard working